Hey everybody, I am back with another coach series topic, and this topic is all about resumes. But it's not tips and tricks and how-tos. What I'm calling this is resume anxiety. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I recently, maybe like a month ago, had to update my resume. And I noticed all of the feelings that I had about updating it, and all this stuff was coming up for me that normally comes up. It's familiar, but because I have some of these tools, I thought it'd be really cool to talk about, the flip side of getting prepared for a job search, and that's really like all the internal work that it takes to motivate yourself to do it. So the reason why I'm calling this resume anxiety is because like I said again, there's all types of stuff that comes up when you think about updating your resume. And I wrote down some common things that I think some people struggle with. I know that I struggled with in regards to getting my resume up to date. So the first thing is just general pressure. We all know, or most of us know, that when you're updating your resume, there's some sort of idea of competition, because we use phrases like, oh, I want to make sure my resume stands out above all these other applicants that are applying for the jobs I'm applying for. So there's like this underlying pressure that we put on our resume because it has to go forth before any type of interviews, to tell the story of how we're such a good fit for this type of job. So the number one thing I think is pressure/competition. The second one that really resonated with me is there's so much advice. If you were to just Google resume tips, I can't imagine how many things would come up, how many opinions you would get, how many do's and don'ts. There's so much advice out there. I think it's almost like, well, whose advice do I follow? I think some things are common tips that you'll hear maybe over and over again, but there's a flavor of the month depending on who you're talking to. So I think that can cause resume anxiety as well. So much advice. The other thing I think that causes resume anxiety is we feel like this piece of paper has to tell our entire story. And there's an essence to how you can craft a resume so you don't feel like you have to put your entire work history on the piece of paper. But that is a very learned skill. And I think that's why a lot of people reach out to professionals for help, because they're like, I don't know how to craft this and feel like I don't have to put my whole entire life on this resume. And that's something that is just really strange. If you don't know how to do that, it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to leave something out. So I think that again can cause resume anxiety. And then the last one I wanted to point out is that if we have maybe I don't say unfavorable work history, but if you feel like you've been at any particular company for a short amount of time, even if you had a really good reason for why you may have only been in one position for a couple months, or why you've had gaps in your work history, that can sometimes be a very tricky thing to explain on paper. Because verbally, we could just say, hey, this is what happened. We may have our quote unquote story together once we go to the interview, but that can be very uncomfortable to craft that message on paper, knowing that that's the first thing that people or managers or HR recruiting people would see. And the way we craft that story is important. So those were just some things I thought just top of mind that cause resume anxiety. I know that I've experienced at least 3 out of the 4 that I talked about. So it's really normal if you've ever updated your resume and felt some sort of angst about, man, am I doing this right, or how do I do this? So instead of berating you with, here's a tip and here's a tip and here's some background and here's some best practices, I thought I would focus on something very different. And just to give you guys a little bit of background on me, I was in human resources for about 6 or 7 years. And I've had some other backgrounds in like higher education as well as corporate America, and I did recruiting directly. So I know, and I've looked at resume after resume after resume. So again, I could provide some of my own tips, but I think there's so much stuff out there. What I really like to focus on is your feelings or your thoughts around this actual document, which is your resume, which is representing you. So the first tip that I thought I would talk about is really focus on your thoughts. So again, the whole concept of reviewing the resume anxiety tips is to say, man, that's what I'm doing, or those are the thoughts that I'm having about this document. So no wonder, I'm having thoughts that I can't put all my work history on this one piece of paper. That's making me feel like really anxious. And then I'm probably going to avoid updating the document altogether. So there's thoughts that are happening behind creating the resume. And the first thing I'd want you to do is just think about or pinpoint what those thoughts are. The next place you can put your focus is really thinking about your ultimate goal. So hone down in really, what is the goal for updating your resume? So it could be something like this. I want to really use my customer service experience to get me in another form of customer service type of role. So the focus there is using your background, your skills from your work history, and showing how your customer service experience can help you move into this next type of customer service role. And the reason why getting a focus is helpful is because if you're trying to blanket your resume to fit every type of job out there, it can be very difficult because any recruiter or manager is looking for the specific experience that job has. So if you're focusing on one particular goal, that will help you narrow down a lot of the noise and the other things that you may not want to do or focus on, so that you can be very clear on what your goal is. And based on your goal, you can figure out where you need to go next. And using that goal, the next thing you would do is figure out what I call your first next step, especially if you're kind of stuck in a rut and you're not sure where to go next. Based on your goal, if we're using the customer service resume, maybe it's project management, maybe it's human resources, whatever that is, what is your next step? So if you're going to be applying for customer service positions, then your next step might be, how do I really build up my resume to show in every position how I've really gone above and beyond for the customers that I serve? So building out, again, man, this position I held, let me really talk about the customer service parts of this position, and then the next and the next and the next. So again, it helps you to continue to focus, but not get so lost in all the do's and the don'ts and things like that. If you want any more tips, or if you want any more help, if you have other questions or topics that you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below and I'll be back in the next one. Talk to you later.